or sketch anything with pencil today. This is going to be just to free ourselves. We want to be free and not worry about anything, because this is really almost looking abstract, but it's not. There's lots of, we have two sections, the sky basically, the water, and here a foreground of the rocks. So quickly analyzing the reference, I see very, very dark rocks here in the foreground, some crazy sea, ocean, and then a very cool sky, which is going to be the softest element of. So if we have to think of, you know, degrees of soft, obviously the sky is going to be very wet on wet and super soft. Then the ocean is going to be crazy brushstrokes, and then very dark foreground. So how we always start, for all who know already and those who don't know, we're just gonna wet the whole paper, and I start from the very top. Just throw some water. You can spray it if you have a spray bottle, if that makes it a little bit more evenly wet. But I just wet the whole paper. Yes, and it doesn't have to go all the way, because I'm planning to actually do some dry brush strokes here in those rocks, and the foreground, the rocks, using dry brush is going to be very, very effective. So, but for now, let's focus on that sky, and the wet on wet technique is all just very wet. It's just grabbing clean water. And let's mix one basic color, like a medium value. So we're going to start with all the medium values, and we're going to be very careful to leave the white of the paper for some very, very bright spots, like somewhere here. We're just going to be leaving that bright. But I'm going to mix, how about we start with this yellow that we have on our palette, a little bit of yellow. I'd like to start a little bit different. I know the whole thing is super blue, but how about we start with this wonderful highlight of yellow, and we just very gently just throw it here. Just gently put some yellow as a nice yellow light. And now we're gonna get and mix. Hopefully you guys like moving fast. See, the whole key of painting this whole thing is just moving really fast, so we don't lose the wetness of the paper. So I'm gonna get a medium value of this ultramarine, like I'm getting some ultramarine, and we're gonna just throw in some of the basic shapes of the sky. And obviously it's a bit darker on the left, so see how I'm moving my brush in any direction. Don't be too worried that it's not exactly the shapes. I'm gonna throw in maybe some of my indigo. It's gonna get a bit darker, so I'm just immediately going to throw some of this. So don't worry exactly about how it looks, because we will get a bit heavier soon. So here again, maybe some direction for immediately for these rays. See, there is a little bit of ray of light just coming from this area. And then mixing ultramarine. If I go too fast, let me know, because sometimes we need to move fast to get the right effects, but I will slow down a little bit. So I'm just slowing. Here it's all wet on wet again, getting this medium value tone. And this is not dark at all. Trust me, this will really dry very, very lightly. It is still medium value. And now with this big brush, I'm gonna quickly just put some shapes right here. And let's keep the sky about, not quite in the middle, but a little bit less from the center and of the paper. And I'm just gonna add a little bit of this. So make sure everything is smooth. Don't go too many times over the same area. And I'm just blending, making sure things are soft. And I'm gonna get, instead of the flat, I will get another brush, like a round with a point. And now I'm gonna pop in some clouds while things are still super wet. So I'm mixing ultramarine and some indigo to get this darkness, really, really dark cloud. And very, very just bravely onto the wet on wet, let's pop in some clouds just by dab, 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 like a little dabbing technique, and almost laying that brush almost horizontally. And there's a little bit of here, and don't hesitate to really make some darker pigment. I just grabbed a little bit too much, but make a nice puddle here, a very, see how big that puddle here is of this dark tone. That's gonna be everywhere. And I'm just dabbing some of the clouds. Don't worry if it doesn't look exactly like your reference. See, some parts of that cloud could be a little bit darker, could be a little bit lighter. If it starts flying all over, don't worry, it's fine. Or if it spatters too much, that's okay. So the reason why I'm moving fast, because I still want my paper to be wet, because these clouds on wet, when they're popped on the wet background, they really look soft and beautiful. So that's the whole goal. And just with a nice dabbing technique, not too much. Don't try to outline things or go over too much. Very freely, almost alla prima. We know what alla prima means, meaning basically just one brush strokes and that's it. And I'm just adding a bit more with this mix of ultramarine and indigo. It may not be exactly like what we see over there, but that is okay. So still wet on wet. My paper is still very wet. Just dab it and create some nice cool with lots of water. Like your cloud should not be dry. It should be not a dry brush at all. And you can lift some areas so you can have some variety of value. And we know what a value is. Value basically means light and shadow, strength of dark versus light. So here I'm just gonna maybe lift some areas. You can also wet your paper towel a little bit and maybe just dab a little bit with this to kind of get some shapes. Okay, now it's recording. All right, so here you can immediately actually see some of these waves. So kind of wipe at the very bottom all these light waves. Just tap gently, and maybe some of the clouds. Let's see. Okay, a little bit of texture, not too much. We don't want to overdo the texture on the sky, because the sky should be really soft as we mentioned it. And here it looks a bit too light for me up there, so I'm going to add some more dark all up here. Don't hesitate to ask questions about why things are, but this is basically, now we can add some more smaller clouds, and I'm just tapping. And I know the paper is probably gonna start drying soon, so that's okay. If some hard edges appear, that's perfectly fine. The whole thing, the purpose of our classes in watercolor here are that we should not be afraid. So zero fear, no mistakes, everything is fine. And sometimes we do challenge the rules and we want to experiment a little bit. So hopefully everybody's doing okay. I'm just popping the whole I try to make some darker areas in the sky, some medium areas, and some light. So see how quickly we already have the sky almost there, and we don't want to overwork it. So less is more in watercolor. What's more important in watercolor is values. So as long as we have darks and lights, we are on the right path. And I'm not gonna start all of a sudden mixing other colors or add too many more. We'll just keep it simple up there, because we want the whole attention to be into this crazy ocean. And the next session I will include boats, because this is a seascape class, so we can include a couple of boats, but I'd like this session to be more of a freeing ourselves and trying to figure out how to paint water and have some fun with that. So now the real fun begins, and I'm going to get our big brush again, the big flat, re-wet this part. Are you guys ready? Are you there? Yay! Almost. Before we get there, actually, before we get to that, we can get some clean water and maybe like as things are still wet over here, how about we spatter a little bit clean water up here at that edge and see how you get this bubbly effect, like little white dots that are just little things. So that is gonna look very much like water. A little bit of what the water does. And you can also, you know, lift some things a little bit. I'm just paying attention to this edge right here, the sky versus the water. See, some are soft, some are a little bit hard. I tap some clean water on that edge. Here we can lift a little bit so we get some highlights here. I can just lift with my paper towel. So the basic idea is to have variety of edge. Some are softer. We can see these are just waves pretty much, like woohoo. So there's nothing too defined. All right, so very good. So let's re-wet this area. Okay, it is recording. That's good. I'm double checking. So hopefully, guys, we're on the same page here. I'm just re-wetting this area, the middle area. So we're here in the middle, and now we're gonna have a lot of fun. So let's mix. I see really intense blue somewhere here. It's not too dark, but it's quite intense and saturated. So I'm gonna grab maybe that phthalo blue. And just really pure phthalo. I'm just gonna do some crazy stuff. See, with a big brush. That's a big flat, so that's okay. We can do some things. And then it's a bit too blue, but I like it. It's kind of obviously a reflection of that light onto the water. Creates some very intense colors. So I'm gonna also mix phthalo with indigo to tone it down a little bit. Let's tone it down, and I see here I'm going to create this little wave, maybe a bit of a dry brush, and then there is another wave. Just basically squint your eyes and look at the big shapes. Don't worry too much about the little shapes or the little foam shapes. Those will come soon, actually very, very soon, because while this color is still wet, we're going to throw in some salt to get this kind of a foamy look. And I want to kill some of my very harsh edges over here by throwing some clean water. And I'm just putting a medium value of blue in this whole middle section with some phthalo, some indigo. Let's do this right here. And I will extend it all the way. So I'm just leaving some areas white, as you can see, but not too much, because this is going to be obviously very intense water. So I'm just adding some darker, much darker. So it should be a lacrima. We should not be having too many layers in this painting, but I just would like you to feel the freedom, really feel that freedom. And some of you who did you guys took that other class, the water class? Some of you, I was amazed at how amazing the paintings were looking with this wave that we painted. So great job, everyone. And I'm gonna throw in some salt. So see, just a little bit. I'm just grabbing while everything is still wet. Let's sprinkle a little bit and let this cook and see what happens. It's gonna get this whole foamy stuff. So it has to be on a wet surface. Yeah, that's it. We just used a little bit. Okay, so things are going good. And while this salt and this color is cooking, I don't know if anything's cooking. I don't know why nothing is showing here. But it will show eventually. It's gonna start. Right, okay. So now let's look at this more of the detail of these wonderful waves. So I'm looking at some dark. So basically analyze and look at the values. So I'm gonna get some more dark of indigo and phthalo, and maybe sharpen some edges over here. I know stuff is happening, so it needs to be darker. very dark over here. I know it's a little bit dark here, so just see it all as shapes, like we are mapping everything. We're just mapping some areas. So there's a little bit of long area, another dark shape.
Lyudmila, are you trying to avoid the salt? Or are you
No,
just painting right over it?
right over it. You can't even
Okay.
avoid it. It's all over the map. So I'm just painting with, with the salt. Okay, so here I'm just adding a little bit of dark. So see how there is a bit of a dark over here on this area. So I'm try to be intense with your colors. Don't be afraid to mix very intense pigments. There is something that's peaking right here, so even maybe a dry brush a little bit can pop. So there's some areas. So all I'm seeing now is the dark, all these darks, a little bit dabs. Just see it as very abstract shapes. And we'll go back and go into all this cool little details. Right now we'll just let it sit for a little bit. Well, let me just add some more dark. There is more dark here on the left. I like this. So just wet on wet, we'll just throw it like that. And do your magic. Very free brush strokes. And don't worry about all the details. I know there are millions of them, but we ignore them. And here I'm just gonna, I'd like to soften some of these edges over here. And we'll get back to all these parts. So then we're gonna move. So as you can see, we're very quickly kind of taking care of everything in a way. All at the same time, like the sky, the water. And now we're gonna very quickly map that rock. And the rock area could be dry brush technique. So I will really dry my brush with the paper towel, get some indigo, or if you have paint gray or even black is perfectly fine in this case because it's really dark and it's very dramatic. So, and you don't have to wet this part. This could be all dry. So I'm just going to now start adding very dark values here. Almost it's hard to even recognize, but if you can do some dry brush techniques, see how with a dry brush leaves this little white, like when you run it a bit horizontally, it just leaves this super cool interesting textures. So when you squint your eye, all I see is this dark shape. So that's what I'm going to do. And not too much water. So this puddle should not be too puddly, should be more dry. So I'm just moving this. Okay. And leave some light. There's some definitely light area on these, and obviously it's either I'm gonna use some blues or maybe some browns to kind of warm it up a bit. But I'm just trying to be as dark as possible. And really, these should be hard. Like, think about the material you're painting. If you're painting water, if you're painting sky, everything should have different, obviously, texture to it. So here, these are going in this direction, and you can move it in any direction. Let's get another brush, a little bit bigger brush. One with actually with a point, because we want to maybe indicate a bit of a silhouette and make it super dark. And as you can see, I'm moving my brush in any direction. Either hold it straight or you can hold it horizontally, but any direction is okay. It shouldn't be like drawing really, it should be painting, which is dabbing and using all kinds of movements. So here I'm just using some dry brush to leave some texture. Here at the bottom, very dark, very dark. So you can mix some of your darks, whatever black or gray you're using, or indigo, with maybe some brown, like the burnt sienna, to get a bit of a warm tone of a rock. Rocks do have some warmth to them. They're not completely in the blues, and that's also going to pull them closer to the viewer. So just on top of what I just did, I just popped in some browns. My reference is printed that doesn't look too detailed, but that's okay. Yeah, that's actually better, because sometimes we get lost in the detail. So, and while everything is still wet, now you can, use your paper towel and kind of, here where the light is on the left, you can just dab and create a bunch of textures. See how we're creating a little bit of texture of a rock. Just immediately with a paper towel, you already have a bit of a texture. And of course there's some water, I think, so that's also cool. A little bit of texture. And we can have a second layer there to just intensify it more. But whatever the light is, and I think it's somewhere here, so we just dab it a little bit. So we're trying to keep it very alla prima, not overworked at all. And I'm just wiping a little bit of the top here, because that's the light. And here. And if you notice how the salt created this, hopefully created some sort of a foamy little effect. After the painting is dry, you can just take it off, but it's just gonna stay there. So whatever you see. So I'm just throwing some salt again where I thought there should be more of this effect. Okay, so just a little bit of warmth again over here. Maybe some more lines. We will add some lines and some more texture, because I guess it's watercolor, so things always end up looking a bit softer. So a little bit of blue. Obviously there is a reflection of that blue, so we'll add some blue over here. Some water, maybe there's some areas of water. There's some more blue. All right, and now mine look a bit too even. So if you have the same problem, we can kind of work on this interesting silhouette. And obviously this is foreground, so it's going to be sharper. It's going to have really nice sharp edges. That's what I'd like to create. So here we're going to work on the silhouette. I ran out of black, so I will get some. I'm painting with not actually black but indigo, so let me see if I have anything darker. You can pop black in this painting, seriously, because I know usually I don't encourage it, but this is so dramatic and it's so dark, so why not? We can just mix a little bit and emphasize some of these nice details. So I'm just grabbing pure black and I'm going to work a little bit on the silhouette. So here I see some very, very dark areas. And whatever you see, yeah. Now we're getting into more of the details. So while this whole area is drying and doing its thing with the salt, we're just going to work a bit on that rock. It should be going all the way up to here. Or does it? Yeah, it's hard to tell, so it doesn't matter. I'm just gonna add more. And here we have some more dark. Hopefully when it dries we can add some more texture. But there's obviously something going in this way. And yeah, we should have the sharpest edges should be somewhere here in the very, very front. So it's all about creating really drama. So the drama is created by high contrast, like anything high contrast, anything that looks, and see how my sky is really dried very light compared to what it should be. So in this case, if you have a similar situation, you can always re-wet some areas. Just re-wet with clean water. I'll just re-wet it and pop in some darker blue. I will just mix, and then I immediately notice it, and I have to do it. So we have to just get some of this blue, some of this black, and really I wanted to darken this even more. Create this whole sense of obviously dramatic dark sky. Okay. And if it happens to dry a bit with a harder edge, you can always soften it a little bit. I just, maybe some could be harder, like sometimes the clouds can have a little bit of a harder edge, but not too much, so the rest should kind of dissolve a little bit, creating even more depth. So here we go. So we are continuing. Now we are looking at this ocean, and things are probably still wet on your paper. You can lift now some specific areas. So here I'm gonna just lift some light. I see some light over here along all this foamy salt. And here in between these two rocks, maybe we can just lift something. And again, seeing it as almost abstract shapes. There is a wave here at the very top of it. There is some highlight. So you can just lift. And if your paper was already dry, you can just re-wet it and kind of run your dry brush on top of it. So we keep working on this. And of course you can use your paper towel, and don't worry at all if your painting looks like the reference or doesn't look like the reference or not close enough. There's zero worry. We just use the reference as basically a reference. We're looking at it, we just get ideas. So that's what I'm seeing here. Yeah, obviously there's something lighter up there. There is a big wave right here in the middle. We can work with this a little bit later. So here I'm just gonna kind of lift some smaller. So anything that's far away, obviously there's some sort of crazy waves, but they're all far away. So they will be thinner and smaller. If there is a highlight, it should be thinner and more refined. So let's see if we can lift something smaller here. I'm just dropping clean water. We're going to dab it and squint your eyes, see where the lightest light is, like in that water. So here there's probably some light. You can always wipe it. There is definitely a big light over here. There's this wave. You can just wipe it too. And there is some nice beautiful edge right there. So basically right now this is the fun part, and no painting will look alike. You're gonna end up having different paintings because this is so much relying on what the watercolor is actually doing and how it's interacting, that we won't have the same paintings at all, that's the beauty of it. So here we can just lift some. And the whole purpose is to learn how to squint your eyes and see only shapes and not think about anything in particular. Don't think of them in terms of logic, just only shapes, recognizing shapes. And there is a lighter shape, and this way you will notice how your painting is going to end up actually looking very realistic when you see all these patterns, rather than trying to copy, mimic, or just see the big blocks first, and that's what I always try to encourage. So, and that's easier, and it makes you faster. You're gonna end up painting so fast, no matter what. Seascapes, portraits, anything. That is the principle, being the big, seeing the big shapes. So I want to focus a little bit on this silhouette up here. I know it's a lot of interesting stuff happening. Maybe you can use some dry brush. So here you can be super creative and really have some fun. Recording keeps stopping every 10 minutes, I guess. So here we get some more darks, and you can spatter a little bit, so you can mix some of this, like a little darker blue, just spatter here and there. It's all adding some more movement, just doing these things. So here we're gonna get some more dark. There's our excuse me, I need to drink some water. Like, my throat is drying out. Sorry about that. Okay, so here we go. So here I'm just looking about this wonderful, beautiful silhouette and some edges. Obviously, there is another one here, a bit harder, and it's a wave. So there's, okay, so I have some brown on my brush. So here's this. Now, some of this yellow that we see in the sky very subtly, it's very, very subtle. It's nice to pop it in the water. So while we are working on all these details, make sure it's not too bright, not too intense. I will probably just very gently introduce some yellow in this area, a little bit. That's where obviously the light is popping, and it will have some effect. And maybe here on these waves, here in that foam area. So just throw it in there, and if it blends in, that's fine. If not, it will blend in. So here I'm just gonna maybe use it for some of these edges here as a highlight. There is a bit of a highlight. So and maybe just a little dab over here, so kind of have a little bit of a diagonal. So we're thinking like designers, so we have a bit of a diagonal to lead the eye. And here we're going to soften some. Okay, don't think of in terms of perfection. Perfection is like trying to be perfect and incredibly precise with our brush strokes will just freeze us too much. So the freer you are, the better. Okay, so now we continue. Now we can now start paying attention more to the details. And I'm gonna mix like a medium to dark blue and have a pointy brush. What's our time? Looking like 2:12. Is that it? No. All right. So we're going to have some more details over here. And just introduce